me actually start. So we're not going to hear you or see you or engage you directly. We're simply going to, and I am simply going to answer your question. So I'll read the question, I'll answer the question. If I can understand it and it makes sense to me, I will do my best to respond and answer it in the best way possible. If it doesn't make any sense to me, oh, that's better. You know, my grandma used to have driving glasses. I have computer glasses. I guess not that much has changed over the years. All right, so if you want to talk and you want questions answered, go in the Q&A, not the chat. If you want to chat with each other or drop each other a note or whatever it is you want to say to each other, that's fine. I don't read the chat. I'm simply answering questions, so I won't respond to that because it's too much for me to handle. So right away, why don't we get started with some questions? So let's start with the first one. A spouse wrote, I'm having a very hard time believing that my sex addict husband could love me and do these things. Can you tell me your view on this? So first of all, every spouse I've ever worked with says, I don't understand how you could love me and do this. Or if you loved me, you wouldn't do this. And what's very hard for me to get across to spouses of sex addicts is that spouses of wives and husbands of alcoholics have been saying this forever. If you love me, you wouldn't drink. Translate that. If the person knew how to stop drinking, they would. If the drinking wasn't filling a purpose that they were filling somewhere else, they would stop. So I think what spouses, and I completely understand this after 25 years of this work, trust me, I've written books for you spouses, you know that. But in part, the deal is that we are troubled. We are troubled people. And if I came home and I said I had diabetes and I'm going to be struggling this rest of my life, you wouldn't say, well, do you love me? If I said I had an alcohol and drug problem, I was really struggling, I need to get help, you probably wouldn't say, do you love me? And even if I had a gambling problem, like a behavior problem or an eating disorder, you wouldn't ask that question. I don't know what you might say, but you wouldn't say, you don't care about me. It's only in this area of the addictions where someone who's a spouse says, if you cared about me, you wouldn't do this. And that from the spouse's perspective, it makes perfect sense because how could you do this if you love me? How could you do this if you cared about me? But that's not where it's coming from. So actually, let me give a quick story from my marriage. So I've been married with my husband for 21 years. And in the first 5 or 6 years, I absolutely lost my mind because he would do things like leave a trail of clothing behind him or like taking them off, leaving them on the floor, or he would make food and leave the kitchen a mess. And I started saying things like, if you cared about me and you understand what was important to me, because I grew up in a very dirty house, my parents didn't do so well on cleaning. It's very important for me, the house to be clean and neat. And so husband, when you do this, it leaves me feeling like you don't care about me because you won't do these simple things that are very important to me. And I went through that for a couple of years. It almost got to the point where I wasn't necessarily sure I was going to stay in the relationship because I was tired of coming home and seeing these things the way they were. And then we took him to therapy, psychiatry, and realized that he had ADD. He has profound attention deficit. No matter what my husband did, he was not going to remember to clean up the kitchen after making dinner because he'd make dinner and then he'd think about the computer. And before you know it, he'd be in the other room on the computer because that's how people with ADD are. They're very impulsive. So for years, I thought, oh my God, if you love me, you wouldn't treat our home and me like this. Now I realize no matter what I did, you weren't going to be able to treat our home the way I want you to because you can't track, you don't follow, you don't remember. And then I started reading books about how to live with someone with ADD. And I learned how to negotiate it and work it out so that I didn't take it personally. And he was able to begin to, on medication therapy, follow through on things that were important to me. So being cheated on, being betrayed is a much deeper level of hurt. And if you love me, you wouldn't do this, than things around the house. But I now understand what's going on, which is if they could do it, they would. Most of the folks I work with would never lie to a coworker necessarily. They would never defraud a contract. They don't particularly cheat on other situations. But when it comes to this stuff, we don't keep our word, we lie, we manipulate and all that stuff. It doesn't mean we don't love you. It does mean we're deeply troubled, and that is just the truth. We held and kept our troubledness from you for a very long time. We knew what was going on, you didn't. So we can absolutely love you, and we can absolutely love our families and not treat them well and do a really bad job of that because we are troubled. That's part of what treatment's about, and all the work that we do is to try to bring people back to a sense of balance and understanding what the priority is in life, and it's not going having sex with other people. So anyway, that I thought that was helpful. That's my best answer to that question. Tammy would say, just move on. So I'm going to move on. Hi, Dr. Rob. In your experience, when you in your experience, when do you find the betrayed spouse's ambivalence begin to dissipate? I am 7 months out from disclosure and find, even though I am seeing my sex addict husband doing the work and showing up as much as he can for me, I'm still very wary about our relationship. And I just think, well, of course you are. It's very early in the process. I don't now. I'd be curious who's asking this question, whether this is any kind of pressure you're getting from your addict husband, or it's just a feeling that you have about, when am I going to start to trust again? I don't think that you can make yourself trust somebody. And I don't think you can invite someone in when you don't feel safe. I think it comes over time. And it comes in little dribs and drabs. Oh, this person's acting differently. Oh, they're letting me in on this. Oh, they're coming home and sharing. And they're going to meetings. They're in therapy. We get little hints that things are going better. And every little hint makes us a little more trusting if we are looking to be more trusting. So forgiveness can take a very long time. I'm going to actually teach a course in forgiveness, I think, because it's interesting stuff. But what you're asking about is not forgiveness. It's simply, when can I feel more safe, more comfortable? When can I lean into the love that I know I have, rather than being in the middle? And I would say 8 months to a year. I mean, I think you're heading in that direction, and the fact that you're asking this question tells me that. But on the other hand, I think you're way too early. If you read Out of the Doghouse, which is the book I wrote for addicts and people who cheat, I tell them it's going to be a year. And so I think just your awareness, which is really cool, that you may not be where you want to be, but you are seeing your spouse do the work, tells me that you are headed that way, but you're expecting a little too much too soon, or your addict spouse is looking for a little too much too soon. So I would say be at peace. I would be wary too, as you should be. Give it a couple of months. That's my best recommendation. Okay, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. Someone said hello. I can't answer that. Okay. Someone said, I was referred to a CSAT, which is a therapist who's a specialist in sex addiction, through Seeking Integrity, which means they called Tammy and she gave them a recommendation. I spoke to that therapist briefly, and he set me up with appointments with someone working in his practice. This therapist is not a CSAT and is a female. Will this therapist be effective, or how should I proceed? I did have 2 sessions with this therapist, and I'm positive but unsure. Okay, so a couple of things. I'm assuming that this is a partner and not an addict. And so if you are a sex addict, I probably would not want to see someone who was not trained in this. Even if they worked with someone that I respected, everyone who comes on staff with us gets the CSAT. They learn, by the way, that means Certified Sex Addiction Therapist. It is just a whole different range of therapeutic work. It's a whole different stance that the therapist has to have. We're looking at the long view of certain things and the short view of others. So those of us who treat sex addicts and love addicts and people with intimacy disorders and porn addicts, we really need very specialized training. And that's not something I can pass on to someone, even if they're trained in the addictions. You have to be able to talk sex and betrayal. And most therapists don't have that language. If you're a betrayed partner, and you are working within the practice of a CSAT, and let's say you're seeing a female therapist on staff, I think that's fine. You like them, because what partners need is completely different than what addicts need. If you read Prodependence, you will understand that, what addicts need is structure, containment, confrontation, hope, organization, accountability. But spouses aren't trying to recover from a behavior that you've been doing forever and is just so automatic to you that you don't know how to stop. Spouses are simply recovering. Well, I don't mean to say it's simple, but spouses are recovering from loss, from grief, from your hopes and dreams being thrown on the rocks, from believing that this person had your back and they never did. I mean, that is what you are recovering from. So for spouses, If someone is supportive, if they're understanding, if they can make you feel comfortable that they understand what betrayal is, the job of the therapist of a spouse is really to support and hold on to and give hope and advice and direction and encourage self-care and all those kinds of things. If it were to come down to a disclosure or something more formal, I might want to make sure, okay, this person just wrote, you're the addict. So no, I would. So I have a colleague who kind of picked up some of the work that I used to do here in LA. And I think a lot of folks at that clinic see interns, which is frequently how it works, by the way. If you're a practice starting out, you become the professional, the licensed person. And then you start to hire people who are less trained, and they train under you, and you make money that way. But under this kind of work, I would never, ever personally refer to someone who didn't have the training, and I certainly wouldn't refer to someone who was not licensed. So it's nice to feel comfortable with a therapist. I think that's number one thing that's most important. But if they are not trained to treat sex addiction, I wouldn't see them. And if I were married to someone, I would imagine they would not feel particularly comfortable with my seeing someone who's not trained and is a female. I have to tell you that, guys, it's the how do I say this? I can count on one hand in 1,000 cases, maybe less, maybe 3 fingers, how many female therapists have actually been inappropriate with a client. It's very, very atypical. Can they be clueless about the addiction? Sure. Can they be clueless about betrayal and recovery? Sure. But I don't think that the fears of many spouses that, oh my God, you're seeing a woman, that means you're going to get something going, are really well founded. But again, the more trained the professional, the better opportunity you're going to have to heal. And if I was referred to a CSAT and they said, oh, I'm really busy, but please see this intern or this therapist I'm working with, I would say, thank you, but I need to see another CSAT. Can you make a referral? That's probably that is my best answer. Okay, next question. I like this better when Tammy's here. It's not as much fun. Anyway, sorry. I was referred to oh, sorry, we got that one. My sex addict husband has been diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. Is this a common diagnosis with sex addicts? How will he handle therapy? Will the OCD be handled separately? Okay, so that's a lot of questions, but let me just briefly talk about obsessive compulsive disorder. So obsessive compulsive disorder is something that is miserable and makes people hate themselves and lose their lives. Because I have a client who has OCD, and when he walks in the room, he starts counting the ceiling tiles and how many dots are on my tie. And he can only take a certain exit on the freeway, because when he takes a different one, he feels like something bad might happen. And he can only step in the shower a certain way. And then he has to wash his hands at least 5 times an hour. These are compulsions without pleasure. Compulsions without pleasure is OCD. Compulsions with pleasure are addictions. Things I do over and over again to reduce anxiety that are not fun, like washing my hands, are compulsions. Things like OCD, mental health issue. Things that I do over and over again that are pleasurable that I do to reduce anxiety are addictions, and they can be substances or behaviors. However, where the two cross will not be determined until this person is stable on medication. I have a client who has OCD right now, and I told him straight out, until you deal with the OCD, you're not going to get better. You can see all the therapists in the world, you can do all the treatment in the world, but your brain is broken and you are very compulsive, and it's hard enough for you to not jump over the cracks in the sidewalk, no less actually start to work on avoiding the situations that lead you to sexual acting out. So the first step with someone with OCD is get them to a psychiatrist, get them on the right medication. That can take a little while. Get them on the right dosage of medication. Medication is required here. You're not going to get better. It's very rare and unusual, in my opinion, for people to get to a quick resolution with OCD without meds. Once the OCD clears, which the medication will help provide, medication can do about 80% of the OCD recovery. The rest, they don't really need to focus as much on. They need to focus on their sexual recovery, their addiction healing. But without dealing with the OCD, I don't think the person can get well. So are they handled separately? Not really. I would pass off this client to a psychiatrist. I would explain what's going on with them and the OCD. I would expect they would examine the client, put them on medication, refer them back to me, tell me what's going on. So it isn't really separate. But in terms of doing treatment, obsession is obsession, compulsion is compulsion. Once I realize that the medication has allowed the person to have choice, I'm not going to do that. I don't have to do that. I can decide not to do that and follow through. Then I know the medication's working, and it's time to really look at how they can heal from addiction. So I would say they're sequential, but I don't think different therapies are required, but medication certainly is. Okay, so I answered that one. Okay, next question. How much input should my partner have on my circle plan? I'll explain that in a second. If there's a disagreement, should I take a stand and completely own it, or let her take control so it's at her comfort? This is a very good question, because we're not talking about boundaries. We're not talking about communication. What a circle plan is how we sex addicts define sobriety. So in AA, it's pretty simple. You don't drink and you don't use mood altering substances. That's very clear. With gambling disorder, it's very clear. I don't seek out unsecured debt. I don't go to casinos. I don't do fantasy football. I don't play the stock market. It's pretty clear what gambling is. But when it comes to healthy sexuality, or in another arena, healthy eating, for people who have disorders that are, eating's a part of life. Sexuality is a healthy part of life. We don't want to eliminate them like drugs and alcohol. We want to modulate them. We want to put them in a box that keeps us safe and the people we love safe. So all that is a precursor to what a circle plan is, which is a written and organized plan for sobriety that allows me to say, I haven't done these things. That means I'm sober. If I did do them, then I've had a slip and I need to go back and work on it. We have to define basically what is okay, healthy sexual behavior for us, and what is not okay, unhealthy sexual behavior for us. Otherwise, we'd be walking around in the dark. However, what goes in the circle plan in the very middle is the bottom line behaviors that if I do this, it's a slip. If I do this, I have crossed my boundary. I have broken my sobriety. And therefore, a couple of things. The things that are, and this is for everybody, the things that are defined as sobriety, that I can say I have a year, I have 6 months, just like anyone in any support group, that has to be sexual and it has to be behavior. So while my spouse, and I'll go back to that, while my spouse and I may be horrified at all the lying I do, and as much as my spouse would like to say, well, lying needs to be in your inner circle, it needs to be a sign of your sobriety because I don't want to be lied to anymore. The answer is, I may lie, I might, and then I need to go back and clean it up. But that's not the same as having sex with a sex worker. That's not the same as compulsive masturbation to porn. So for us addicts, we need to have a very clear behavior that is sexual in order to call that sobriety. And here's another example. I drove through the wrong part of town. That's middle circle, that's warning sign. But then I called my sponsor and they said, come on over and have coffee and get out of that part of town. And I did. Well, I was there and I thought about doing something, but I did the right thing and drove off and got support instead. That's a win, right? So I wouldn't ask somebody to break their sobriety because they drove into a neighborhood, let's say, or because they said the wrong thing to someone. I would if they engaged in concrete sexual behavior that I wouldn't want to see if I were walking by. So the bottom line is, of course, your spouse and all partners need to see what your sobriety is. Absolutely. And they absolutely get to weigh in on their feelings and thoughts about it. They also need to understand how the plan is built, which is not just sobriety, but it's also warning signs and also rewards of healthy living. And what the whole thing is all about. It's not just about sobriety. But the bottom line is that you have to decide what is right for you on your plan. You get to choose whether that will or won't meet what your partner wants. That's up to you, your sponsor, your therapist. But in this sole case, it is not up to the spouse, nor does the spouse have a right to say, you do this and that's sobriety. You can say how you feel, you can say what you want, but this is where our boundary is. My recovery is mine. And that doesn't mean that I don't have to show it to you. I do. That doesn't mean I don't have to have a conversation with you. I do. That doesn't mean I get to ignore your feelings or your input. In fact, if you gave me input about my plan and I didn't feel comfortable with it, I would go to my sponsor, I'd go to my therapist, I would ask questions. I would love someone here to say, does this belong in a circle plan or not? But ultimately, it is me who has to decide whether it works for you or not, whether you stay in my life or not, whatever happens. Well, how do I define sobriety? And then to share that with you. You may come up with some great thing that I never thought of, and I'll need to put that on my plan. But you may also come up with, things that simply are not related in a direct way, and I have to say no. So that's my best answer for that. Don't you all miss Tammy? It's so much more fun when there's two of us up here. Although I would not begrudge this wonderful woman doing snow angels with her grandkids. I'm sure that's more fun than we are. Okay. Someone said something I don't really understand. Spouses and wives of alcoholic don't involve a different partner. Oh, I see. I understand that. So to the spouse who said this is related to the question earlier, which is, how can they love me if they did this? What I'm saying to you is sex addiction is the same as alcoholism, is the same as gambling addiction. It's the same for us addicts. Yes, it's different for you. We are betraying you. We don't betray you with alcohol, one could say. We do betray you with porn and sex with other people, but for us, it's the same. For us, it is an illness. It is something that is wrong with us. It's a brain disorder. It requires work. And in our minds, it doesn't matter whether we're betraying ourselves, a family member, we get a DUI, we have sex with other people. It's all the same to us, which is a way to escape my reality and have control over it. And most often something I don't want you to know about because you wouldn't like it. And the whole point of that discussion was, I understand that spouses feel like you couldn't love me if you're with someone else. How could this be caring about me? Look at how you treated me. That's all true. However, it's also true that addiction is an illness. And if I have an addiction, it's what I do out there that is problematic is not a reflection necessarily of any of my feelings about you. Does it affect you? Yes. Does it ruin us? Yes. Is it awful and uncaring? Yes. Is it about the idea that I don't love you? No. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't try to hide it. If I didn't love you, I'd just do what I wanted. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't try to make sure you never knew about it, to be honest with you. I don't want to lose you. You're important to me. I don't want to get in trouble. And so I lie about it. To me, I actually consider that a sign of wanting to protect the relationship, since I'm not able to stop that. By the way, you spouses know that I get really real, right? I may not always say the things you might want, but I'm on your side and I'm with you. Okay. I am a betrayed partner with a question and an example about compartmentalization. My sex addict husband has been sober for 18 months and in recovery. Good news. So this is the question, the scenario. Back in his addiction, he made birthday videos for me and his affair partner. He thought of both of us at the same time. The affair partner and I each have birthdays in the same month. The video he made for me looked like more of an afterthought, short, simple, and like he hadn't done anything for this in the 30 years we've been together. The birthday video for the affair partner was a major production. He recorded it. He recorded himself in his hobbies. He ordered special props. How is this compartmentalization when he's thinking about us both at the same time? I can tell you that. So compartmentalization means that I can go over here and do this and not think about that. So even though on some way I know that cheating on you and giving you an STD and seeing sex workers is horrible for you, for me, for the relationship, I know that. I can break that off from my reality with you and go do it anyway. So it isn't compartmentalization that leads somebody to treat an affair partner differently than a partner. It's more like being a jerk in my mind. But don't you understand that everyone who's having an affair thinks it's golden and amazing and wonderful? They send jewelry to their affair partner and they take you to Olive Garden, right? Like that's how an affair is. This person gets built up and they're special. And of course, they don't have to change diapers with you. They don't have to do laundry with you. They don't have to watch you age. So having an affair is much easier and more to have it be exciting and intense rather than a meaningful, committed, long-term relationship. But this is not compartmentalization. This is someone treating their affair partner better than their spouse. And you're right, you are an afterthought, but don't you understand, spouses? For us, when we're active in our addiction, you're always an afterthought. Everything and everyone is an afterthought, except our primary goal, which is getting laid or doing drugs or whatever it is we want to do, and everything else comes second. So the fact that he thought of you at all, I don't know what he was thinking, why he did it. Maybe it occurred to him, oh, if I did this over here, maybe that might be a nice thing to do over here, but you're not the one he's giving diamonds to. You're the one he's taking to Olive Garden. And so you're not going to get the special video while this person is in a compulsive, addictive, driven relationship with an affair partner. You're not going to get the same vacations. You're not going to, it goes like that. End the affair, stop the acting out. And then maybe you two could have a conversation about what you would like to have on holidays and birthdays and what you want to share together. Right now, if this is still going on, he's clueless or she's clueless. Okay. I have to remind myself to breathe. We are 14 months post-discovery. So let me just say, for everyone who doesn't understand that concept, discovery means that I am a spouse or a partner or a family member or someone else close to you, and I had no idea that you were acting out. None. I had no idea you were doing any of this sexual stuff outside of our relationship. And discovery is, I just found out about part of it or all of it. It's not the same as disclosure, which is a formal therapeutic process. Discovery is, oh my God, I found this on the computer. It's literally discovery. So we are 14 months post-discovery, us, and this is a married or a committed couple. My sex addict husband stopped acting out immediately and claims to have no cravings or euphoric recall. How common is this? He's in full retirement. He's in treatment. First inpatient, now weekly CSAC groups and 3 weekly SAA meetings. This is wildly frustrating because it was so easy to stop. Why didn't he? Okay, there are a lot of questions in there. So let me give the best answers I can in order. This is my experience, 25 years of doing the work. Take what you like and leave the rest. I think it is absolutely impossible, not in any way possible, for someone who has been doing this kind of behavior for a long time to stop on a dime and never more have cravings or euphoric recall. I just think that's a lie. I think that we want you guys to believe that every guy I know says, oh, to his spouse, the minute you found out, I never did it again, and I'll never do it, never, never, never. That's just not reality. So first of all, that's a lie. And that is a lie intended to keep you quiet so that you won't constantly be suspicious or worrying. What I wonder about is, have you been through disclosure? Have you met with a formal therapist and sat down and he had to read you and go through all of his behaviors that you didn't know about and all of that? Yes, it's wildly frustrating, I think, because you're being lied to. Someone doesn't do something for half your marriage and then turn around and say, oops, I don't feel like doing it anymore, and they're done. I will say this, that in a crisis, people can have their compulsive behaviors lifted for a period of time. So I came home one night and you were on the computer and you found out everything about my acting out, and you had discovery. And then I realized, oh my God, look at what this is doing to you, my relationship, my family. And I am so freaked out as an addict that I'm going to lose whatever it is I'm going to lose, that I lose my desire to continue. That all of a sudden I don't feel like acting out. And I don't feel like that is true for many of us when we are in crisis. However, it's going to come back. And the work that needs to be done while I am in this honeymoon of in a crisis and don't feel like acting out, that is when the therapy, the 12-step meetings, that's when I need to get to work, because it's going to be back. And when it comes back, the desire to act out, I want to be prepared. So I think Tammy would kind of say it like this: what is the plan for you to have disclosure? What is the plan for you to go through the whole story and find out what you didn't know about? I see 14 months post-discovery. I don't think of anything about disclosure. And yeah, I 25 years of treating addicts and being one myself, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be wonderful if I got to have a different career? Imagine that, if you guys could just have it all go away once you got caught. Well, I wouldn't have to work. I could take my Social Security and go. But the reality is that it takes a lot of work to stop and a lot of support to change your life. And, I don't I'd like to have a conversation with him because I think he's minimizing and not being honest with you. I just don't think that what he says is possible unless it is crisis related, and in which case within a few months, it will be back. Okay. Let's go on. Oh, by the way, I want to remind you guys that I don't respond to the chats. So if you want to drop a note to someone, or you want to send them a book title, or you want to answer a question for one of them, feel free. Or you want to say hello to someone you see here every Monday night, great. But I will only answer questions in the Q&A because it's very hard for me to keep up with the chat at the same time, especially with my partner here gone. So let me read the next question. I'm just going in order. And by the way, I'm only at 5:07, so I have a lot of work to do. That's when this question was asked. My addiction is, I don't know what MB is. My addiction is MB with porn and fantasy. I hid it for many years. As to disclosure, can you talk about how much detail to disclose and when and where? I have watched you comment about details, but I'd like some more information. So I would not do disclosure, period, unless there was a professional involved. Let me just say that I didn't see anything about seeing a therapist, a CSAT. I didn't see anything about working with people who have done disclosure. So I would not approach this activity without the support of people who understand it, have been through it, and preferably professionals who know what they're doing. This is rife for destroying everything you've tried to heal. I will say, though, I will answer your question, although I really know that if you're working with a professional and you were doing this together with guidance, you wouldn't be asking this question because you already have the answer. So the answer is, if I were reading a disclosure to my spouse, it would be an inventory. It would be, I have seen this many sex workers since we've been together. I have spent this much money on seeing those sex workers. I had an affair during these dates, and this is who I had the affair with. I might say something like, I had sensual massages or sexual massages. There was no oral sex. I did have sex unprotected with my affair partner. This is how long I had the affair. This is, that kind of thing. I would not ever say, this is how large their breasts were. This is how the kind of sex we had. I would not encourage, nor would any of us professionals really encourage, graphic details. How many times, how often, where, who they were, how much was spent. Sure. Spouses need to know, how long has this nightmare been in my life and how bad did it get? But what they don't need to know is the graphic details, even though your spouses will want them. Because if you ever are going to have sex with us again, if you're ever going to make love with us, if you're ever going to heal your trauma, spouses, then you can't have these images and thoughts in your head. I cannot unsay something that's very graphic, and you will never forget it. When we're having sex in the future, you might be thinking, well, I don't have that this other person had. And he told me that he's into that. So, you'll be out the window in your head, leaving the room, or obsessing about how, if you guys don't do this, why would they want to do it with that person? It just doesn't work that way. So yes, inventory, no apologies, a list of things that partners will then create questions about. If you ask me about something graphic, I will say, I'm not going to go there because I don't want to hurt you further. So details, yes. Graphic, no. No body parts, no body sizes, no particular sexual behaviors beyond very clinical. And I'll just say this, in a disclosure, I use words like penis, vagina, breasts. I use very broad clinical terms. I don't say anything graphic in my language or anything triggering in my language. I simply say it the way it was without being graphic. Okay. Next question. What do you suggest when a CSAT, a certified sex addiction therapist, a sponsor, and the spouse all disagree on a particular situation? Okay, so the addict just had a moment, and oh, by the way, by asking me, you're now going to get a fourth opinion. So I just want to say, and if it's different than the other three, now you're going to have four. So you're going to have to pick one, and it may not be the one you like. So I'll do my best. The addict just had a moment of objectification. And what that means is I'm walking with my spouse who is a sex addict, and they notice somebody on the street, and I can see it in their eyes, they objectified them. Okay. The therapist says it was objectification and not handled well in the moment, and that it needs to be reported to the spouse as inner circle behavior. I disagree. The coach says it was objectification, but handled well and should not be brought up to the spouse. I agree. And the spouse says it was handled well, but it needs to be reported. I disagree. So let me just go through them. For the therapist, yes, it is objectification. And no, it wasn't handled well in the moment if that person didn't reach out and call someone or do so, or get in their car and drive off, or if they lingered, if they hung around, if they moved toward it instead of away from it. No, it was not handled well in the moment. Does it need to be reported as inner circle? No. Can you imagine if my sobriety was dependent on objectifying? That would mean anytime. Do you know that we have lustful thoughts every 15 seconds? Maybe 10 if you're a man. I mean, there is healthy sexuality. I am going to see people. I am going to notice them. I don't need to pursue them. I don't need to talk to them. I don't need to find their friend and see where they live. But I will absolutely, as a human being, notice other people and objectify them. That's human. And to say that I'm going to eliminate that in my recovery is not rational. I'm going to see people, I'm going to objectify them. If it gets really hot and heavy for me in my head, I need to go seek help. So I would never myself, going back to the first question we had tonight, put objectifying other people in my inner circle. I'm going to do it because I'm human. And if I had to put in my inner circle, I would never be sober. So it is not something I would put on the inner circle. That's not correct. I also would not report it to my spouse. Spouses, if you hear every single time a sexual thought crosses in our minds, you will never be at peace, and we will never get any peace. What I need to tell you, my spouse, is if I have had a slip, if I have crossed that inner circle boundary and I no longer have 6 months or 8 months or a year, I am starting on day one, you need to know about it. That is absolutely my job to tell you if I am starting my time again. I may not like the result. You may not like hearing it, but I have to be honest with you and truthful about this. However, if I do something in my middle circle, like look at someone too long or drive through the wrong neighborhood, that's something for my sponsor. That's something for my therapist. That is the stuff that I need to work on, but not bring to you every time it happens, because it will drive you insane. I will have sexual thoughts. I will have sexual feelings. I will look around. That's human. If I told you every single time I did that, we would never heal our relationship, and I would feel like a failure all the time. So let me answer them again. I objectify something. The therapist said it was objectification, yes, and not handled well in the moment. That's unknown to us. And that it needed to be reported to the spouse's inner circle behavior. I completely disagree. The coach says it was objectification, but handled well and should not be brought up to the spouse. I agree with that. Don't bring it up unless it's a slip. And the spouse says it was handled well, yet it needs to be reported. And I would disagree with that too. We need to report our bottom line behaviors to you. If we cannot report every time a middle circle behavior happens, or there's no healing the relationship, you might as well throw it out the window. However, I know that you spouses want to know everything. I know that. And I know after all these years of doing this work that you believe that it's just, you need to know this. And if you could just find out that, and you'll be at peace if you just knew this and then that. But it never ends, because what you're looking for, you're not going to find in your questions. You're never going to be at peace with what we did. You're never going to forget about it. And finding out this answer or that answer or looking at this or that is never going to put you at peace. However, you do it anyway, because that's the natural part of your grieving, is to try to understand the extent of the problem, try to manage the problem. I get all of that. However, there are parts of the recovery process that simply belong to us, and we are responsible for working on them, being accountable to them, and healing them. And while you may want to hear every detail and know every piece, it is a boundary, and it is a healthy boundary that I'm not going to tell my spouse every time I struggle. Okay. And you spouses won't like that. I know that. Okay, back to the first question. I don't think this is the same person. If he loves me, how could he do this to me? How about a husband who does the recovery work consistently, drops out, doesn't do the recovery activities, and he says it's all too overwhelming for him? I've asked him to move out. Okay, this is fantastic, because you're not saying, if you did those things, how could you love me? And the things are the acting out. You know, what you spouses are saying is, if you love me, how could you have this affair? How could you see these sex workers? How could you look at all that porn? What kind of person who loves me would do all that? We covered that. But this is something completely different. What this is how you get to recovery, which is, bottom line, I have to do these things whether I like it or not, because if I love you, here's where it does apply. If I love you, I'm going to help you see my commitment to healing. And by going to therapy and going to groups and getting an accountability partner and having a sponsor, that's how I work on the process. It's also how I prove to you that I'm committed to our relationship healing. So if you do not see me doing these things, or you hear me say things like, which makes me laugh, by the way, it's too overwhelming for him. That's a laugh line, right? Like, how overwhelming is it for every one of you spouses to have your lives annihilated in terms of what we've done to you in the relationship? And then poor baby, it's too overwhelming for him to go to some meetings and talk to a therapist. I would ask him to move out. So I want you to understand the difference, which is when I'm in my insanity and acting out, that is not a sign of loving you or not loving you. That's a sign of my insanity. When I am working on this and active and present and trying to heal it, if I stop doing those things and I complain about the work of recovery being too difficult or too distracting or too overwhelming, well, it wasn't too distracting or overwhelming for me to have sex with all these people. So it probably isn't so distracting and overwhelming for me to do the things that it takes to recover. And if I don't do those things, you need to kick me out. By the way, I wrote a book for this man. It's called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. And I suggest you buy the book and throw it at him, because he obviously has no clue how to restore your trust or restore the relationship. He still is more invested in how he feels and what he's doing rather than the relationship. So yes, change the locks. See, spouses, I'm on your side, but I got to articulate it. Okay. Yeah, someone asked, do I have experience with sexual energies transmutation? Don't know anything about it, never experienced it. Can't help you with that one, sorry. I don't understand, someone said, how non-sexual childhood trauma becomes sex addiction. What types of non-sexual trauma manifest as sex addiction and why? So let me just say this to start. There is no one on the planet who can tell you why definitively why I have a sex problem, sex addiction problem, you have a gambling addiction problem, you have an eating disorder. We have hints about this from family histories. We have hints about it from both DNA and the actual lived history. But what we don't have is, oh, you have this gene or this happened to you, and therefore you're going to become this kind of addict. We don't have an answer to that. That said, having seen 1,000 or more sex addicts and written 10 books about them, I can tell you the answer. The number one issue that drives sexual acting out, and I think actually most addictions, is neglect. Neglect. We become so desperate to be loved that we will do anything to be loved or to feel loved, because we grew up in very empty or very difficult environments. I did not learn I was valuable where I grew up because it was more important to attend to my family members, my caregivers. They were very troubled, very sick, and they needed more of me than they could give each other. So what I'm saying is I was profoundly neglected emotionally and sometimes physically. Now, I went to a nice school, I had nice clothes, I was always fed, but I could get locked in my room for 18 hours. Because my parents were busy. I could get ignored for days because they were busy or whatever that is. Or emotionally, I can get neglected because the needs of my caregiver exceed mine. My mentally ill mom, her needs always came first. God bless her. She had a horrible life and I feel terrible for her. And I'm very sad at her passing, but I got this from her. She was so intensely enmeshed with me and yet neglecting me at the same time. Enmeshed, in other words, doing everything she could to get attention and support from me, but actually not focusing on me, her child, except as an extension of her. That left me neglected. Now, maybe I learned to rub myself on, touch my body to comfort myself. Maybe I learned to rub myself on my crib. Maybe, we don't actually know, there are sexual related feelings because children it does feel good down there when you're a little kid. It is a way of soothing and calming yourself. And I can imagine that might have happened in various ways to feel better in an impossible situation where there was no one there for you. So I might have learned fantasy and sexual fantasy as a way to space out and make myself feel better when I was locked in that room for 18 hours with no one to come get me. I remember looking out the window, thinking about the cars that were going by, checking off boxes. I knew a Chevy Impala from a Ford LTD at night, because that's how I occupied myself when I was feeling so lonely, was compulsive behavior that was in fantasy. And I'm absolutely certain when I found sex, it jumped right in there and became the primary fantasy. But no one molested me, not really. I was used emotionally and I was neglected. I never learned that I had value. I never learned that I had worth. I know how to put it on and look like, I'm amazing, but inside, very little self-esteem, because that comes about through being esteemed. At some point, I learned, and I think most sex addicts learn, that I can get what feels like validation, what feels like attention, in a controllable way when I'm doing it with a stranger. Because strangers can never let me down, never disappoint me, never abandon me like I was as a child. What we do as addicts is we seek out controllable situations that mimic our needs being met. I feel important, I feel special, I feel wanted when I'm having sex with a stranger, but I don't seek out anyone that I really love for that. Don't you spouses understand that we're terrified of you? Don't you understand that we think if we are intimate with you, not think, it's not conscious, but our experience is through early life that if we reach out, if we try to get attention, if we need things, it's not going to be met. We try over and over again as kids, hello, I'm here. It doesn't happen. And then we learn, oh, reaching out to other people doesn't work. They don't attend to me. I'm just stuck with all this longing. So why bother reaching out to other people if it's not going to matter and I'm going to end up hurting anyway? We give up on people because we believe that deeply meaningful relationships will eventually end up with us in pain. This is addicts. So we choose controllable situations like sex addiction, where we can feel wanted, desired, and important, but that's all really superficial, but it feels like it works. By the way, how do I know it doesn't work? Because I keep doing it over and over again, and I don't really get fulfilled with love and support. Turning to you as my spouse, that's where I really might get hurt emotionally. That's where I might feel abandoned, neglected, or used like I did when I was a child. And I never want to feel that way again. So I will compartmentalize my life where I am in control in my relationship because I know all the stuff that you don't. And when I'm not happy in our relationship, I don't turn to you and say, this is what's going on, or let me tell you what I need. I just let that be, and we're superficial. And then I go over here and I have something superficial with, let's say, a sex worker or an affair. In other words, sex addicts piece their lives together with intimacy over here and sexuality over there, and that keeps us safe. And that's compartmentalization, and that's how we, in adult life, act out our trauma. One of the questions, I do consultations, guys might know, Tammy sets them up for me. And I will spend 90 minutes to 2 hours sitting with you couples, trying to figure out what your next steps are. And it's almost always the case that, what do I want to say about your spouses? Oh, that, well, it's almost always the case that there isn't that kind of trauma. So anyway, I want to go on. There's a lot of stuff I want to say about this, but there's so many questions. Okay. So someone says, I am a chemsex addict. And let me just say what that means. That means that this person simultaneously or in relationship to abuses drugs and alcohol, chem, and sexual behavior. So someone who abuses meth and has sex at the same time, or they drink and they get really loaded and then they have sex with anyone who comes along. This is a combination of drugs and alcohol and sex. So the person, and people struggle with both. And one of the issues and one of the reasons we created Seeking Integrity, which is our program out here, is for a population of men who struggle with this, because it is absolutely my experience that if we don't deal with the sexual issues, you're going to relapse on drugs and alcohol. It doesn't matter how good a job you do in treatment for drug and alcohol work. If you don't get to the sexual issues underneath, you're going to go out and use again. It's unconscious. It's just what's going to happen. And so that's why we exist. In part, we exist for sex addicts, but we also exist for people who have not gotten to the underlying issues that drive their addiction to drugs and alcohol, which is often trauma and stuff like that. That was a lot. Let me answer the question. I am a chemsex addict with 6 months sober, and I have difficulty setting boundaries. How do I set boundaries? when I have immense shame, well, how do I say, I am a chemsex addict and I have difficulty setting boundaries. Okay, how do I set boundaries when I have so much shame because of the cheating I did? How do you get a sense of what are the right boundaries when you have guilt and shame? Or your partner guilts or shames you into agreeing to something because of cheating? Okay, so these are very good questions. They're kind of being asked in certain ways in a couple of different examples, because really what's being asked here is um, for the addict, what do I get to do and set up for myself that is mine, that my spouse can give feedback on, but that I get to decide, whether that's my circle plan. Here's an example. My wife wants me to go to Sexaholics Anonymous meetings because she hears in her group that the SA meetings are really tough. But I've been attending Sex Addicts Anonymous, SAA, and I have a lot of friends there and I have a sponsor there and I feel really good about that program. Do I have to go to SA because that's what my spouse wants? You know, there's two ways to look at that. Number one, could you go to SA once a week and would you get something out of it while keeping SAA as your primary program? Or would your spouse feel heard? Yes. You have to do it? No. This is your boundary. This is your recovery. It has nothing to do with acting out, and it isn't really even focused on your relationship. It's focused on you and your healing. So you get to make those decisions. When a spouse says, and we hear this a lot, at Seeking Integrity, we're setting up an aftercare plan. We're telling you what and where you need to do things when you get home. So let's say that we set up that you need to, as an addict, go to groups and meetings 4 days a week in therapy or whatever. Many spouses I've worked with will come back and say, well, wait a minute, you weren't home 4 days a week because you were acting out, and now you're not home 4 days a week because you're in recovery. What's the difference? I'm still all alone. You need to be home, these 2 nights a week, and you can go do that other stuff the other 2 nights a week. Well, there's a boundary, right? Because my spouse is absolutely right. I was not around when I was acting out, and they had all of the family responsibility. And now I'm not home as much because I'm working on sobriety, and they still are carrying some of the responsibility more than they should. But on the other hand, my recovery is the priority for us to have a relationship. So I have to, at least for a period of time, put that first by getting it solid. You may not agree. You may say, I deserve to have you home 2 nights a week. You may be right. And that might mean that I have to put my meetings onto Saturday afternoons or Sunday mornings so that I am home to meet your needs. However, I have to go to the meetings. I have to go to as many as they told me to attend. So when it directly relates to my recovery, that's in my court. If my spouse sees things that I'm doing or learns about things like something in my plan that they don't like, we should talk about it. I want to hear everything my spouse has to say that they like or they don't like about my process. I may or may not agree or decide to do it, but I want to know, and then I'm going to run it by other people. Spouses aren't guilting you into anything. You need to hear that, okay? If you didn't feel guilty, it would go right over your head. You feel terrible about what you did, and your spouse is shoving it in your face, as they should, because people who do bad things deserve to feel bad about it. And we did bad things and got away with them and felt perfectly fine for a long time. It is good for us addicts to see the pain that we have caused someone we love. It is good for us to see how hurt they are. We don't do it to hurt them or to cause them pain, but it's right in front of us. And if we feel guilty, it's because we created circumstances under which we would feel guilty. So the only thing I don't like in this particular question is the idea that my partner makes me feel guilty. No, they tell you what their experience is. They tell you what they feel and what they're going through. If you feel guilty, maybe there's something for you to look at. Finally, I think the boundaries that you and your partner are going to set really would be a good thing to do with another couple who's been through this, with maybe her therapist, your therapist, a couples therapist. You're not necessarily going to get this right, especially at 6 months sober. So get somebody else involved. I do consultations. Call Tammy and get one. Find some professional who can help guide these questions. By the way, I just want to say before we stop, things that are useful to you that are free. I have a podcast. We have almost 1 million downloads. It's called Sex, Love, and Addiction. It helps people not act out when they're driving the car. It helps spouses get through the day because they're listening to me talk to professionals about intimacy and betrayal, sex, love, and addiction. That's free. I have a blog on Psychology Today. I have for 8 years called Sex and Love in the Digital Age. There's a lot of information there. If you go to sexandrelationshiphealing.com, sexandrelationshiphealing.com, that's where all of our free groups are and free lecture series and all that stuff. And beyond that, if you want to find your way to treatment or other kinds of work, it's seekingintegrity.com. If you write Tammy, if you want a therapist, you want to know where there's a group in your area, you want to learn more about treatment, you want to find out how to figure out what book you should read. If there's a technical thing like that, write Tammy, Tami at seekingintegrity.com. Tami at Seeking Integrity. Tammy will send you a list of therapists in your area. She'll recommend books for spouses. She'll encourage a group that you can go to for free. That is what Tammy is for. She would say that's what she is for, is to be a complete resource. And she helps clients find their way to treatment. So I'm going to answer one more question because I got to. So let me see. I'm going to pick it though. Okay. I like this question. Hello, Dr. Rob. Hi. I am a sex addict and I used to frequently and genuinely compliment my wife about how she looked or food she made or work she had done. But after discovery 6 months ago, my compliments, though genuine, seem to have an opposite or no effect. Is this normal? Or should I stop complimenting as it is having the opposite effect, and for how long? So I think, number one, I haven't answered your question, but I think this is something you should talk about with your spouse. You know, what is wrong with your sitting down and saying, you know, since this all came out, I've noticed that you really object or don't want to hear anything nice I have to say. And I feel like maybe I shouldn't be saying it, or maybe it makes you more upset. What is going on when I compliment you about something? What do I need to know? And then be quiet and listen. I know what your spouse is going to say. I can tell you now, they're going to say, I don't want to hear that crap because you used to compliment me before when you were doing all that stuff and I felt really good about it. And now that I know what was really going on when you're complimenting me, that you were lying and cheating and doing all this other stuff, I don't really trust anything you have to say. So the spouse is reminded of your cheating because they don't want to hear how great they are, how wonderful they are. They want to see you contrite with humility and working on yourself, not, oh, you're so great, because they're not going to believe it. If we were kind and loving before, they're not going to buy into kind and loving now until they trust us again. And trust can take a year to rebuild, provided you're going to meetings, you're going to therapy, you're working, you've done disclosure, and you're doing this work. So I would put that away and say to your spouse, I would love to be complimentary, but you let me know when you think you're going to feel safe with that. Because you're right, it is not a good idea. By the way, I want to say to you addicts, related to this before we go, if you're in the first year of recovery, do not say the following things to someone you love or are married to. Do not say, I'm really sorry. Do not say, please forgive me. Do not say, I didn't mean it. Do not say, well, I'm just an addict. I didn't know how to do it differently. Don't say any of those things. This is not the time for you to ask for forgiveness, to give apologies, to justify what you did. This is your time to listen and to do your best to follow the path that you've been given to heal. Every time one of our spouses hears, please forgive me, I didn't mean it, oh, you look so great, they're thinking, what a bunch of lies. So don't do it, because it just feels like we're trying to get them. They feel controlled. They feel like you're just trying to get me into a place where I'm going to forgive you or whatever. And it doesn't matter where we are coming from. They don't trust us and they don't have any respect or belief in what we have to say. So yes, stop the compliments, stop the apologies, and just show up with humility and prove to your spouse that you want them to feel good, not with compliments, but with the behavior you exhibit toward recovery. Go to 4 meetings a week. Invite your sponsor over for dinner. Show your spouse that you're actively doing things to heal. That will make them feel a lot better than all the compliments in the world. It may even lead to them beginning to believe them at some point. Folks, my name is Dr. Rob Weiss. I am so glad to be here with you. I will be here next Monday night and every Monday night answering questions about these issues, sex, love, and addiction. You know, we have a whole website. We do multiple groups like this every week with different speakers. I really invite you to enter our world. If you want a direct referral to a group, to a therapist, to treatment, to a book, write TAMI at seekingintegrity.com, and Tammy will be back next week. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. One more thing, addicts, make sure you plan out your time for the holiday. We are very likely to act out when we are looking at a 3-day weekend with no plans. Don't just plan Thanksgiving Day. Make plans for Friday and Saturday. When we have things to be accountable to, we are much less likely to act out. And one of our primary triggers as addicts to acting out is unstructured time alone. So if you're looking at a holiday weekend with any large period of unstructured time alone, you're in trouble. Structure it, you don't have to be doing something. You can just say, I'm going to start this movie at 9 o'clock. I'm going to call my sponsor, tell them I'm starting it at 9, and I'll call them at 10:30 when I'm done watching the movie. You have held yourself accountable. Being accountable to recovery is how we stay sober. Having long periods of time with nothing planned is how we act out. Y'all have a great holiday. Be grateful to be alive. I really encourage you, as much as problems we have in these rooms, be grateful to be alive. I've lost people this year to COVID and not. I really am well reminded of what's important. Be kind to each other and have a great holiday. Bye for now. See you next week.